Alien woman and her daughter were freezing in a cave until the human man found them, just in time. The armored convoy crawled across the frozen plain, engines rumbling low under layers of reinforced plating streaked with ice. The planet, designated only as Settlement 84 Theta by the human colonial forces, was nothing more than wind-scoured rock and endless drifts of snow that could bury a man in minutes. The sky churned with black clouds. Sharp gusts blasted the convoy, rattling the metal cages chained to the open flatbeds and back. Inside one of those cages, Aralina sat with her arms wrapped tight around her daughter, Raimi. Thin silk strips clung to Aralina's violet skin, designed by the traders to showcase her body to prospective buyers. Garments cut, so they revealed as much as they covered. They provided no protection from the cold that sliced through the bars, stinging her bare arms, numbing her legs. Every time the transport jolted, Raimi whimpered, small fingers gripping her mother's waist. The girl was barely 11 in Earth Standard years, young even among their kind. She was shaking so badly her teeth chattered. Aralina lowered her head, whispering close to Raimi's ear. "Stay close. Breathe slow." She was terrified. The fear never left. It pulsed under her ribs like a second heartbeat, steady, relentless. Since they'd been captured 3 weeks ago during a raid on their village, Aralina hadn't felt warmth. She hadn't felt safe. The human traders had stormed into her settlement with stun rifles and plasma torches, rounding up every female they could find. Males were killed or dragged away to labor camps. Those with premium qualities, exotic features, unusual skin hues, rare hair and eye patterns, were thrown into cages for the slave trade. Aralina and Raimi had been among them. They were property now, according to the human soldiers guarding them. Merchandise bound for a colonial outpost where men with credits and dark appetites waited. That was the mission for the humans. Capture, transport, profit. Nothing more. A guard banged the cage with his rifle, but glaring at her through the bars. He wore a thick military jacket with a fur collar and a matte black helmet that hid most of his face. His voice was muffled behind his face shield. "Keep quiet in there. Any noise, and I gag you both." Aralina didn't look away, though every instinct screamed to her to drop her gaze, make herself small. She couldn't afford to seem weak. That got you hurt faster. Her pulse hammered in her neck. She hated them. The humans who treated her people like curiosities, commodities, things to be bought and sold. Her fear pressed against the walls of her skull, but under it was raw fury. She locked it in place, holding herself steady, holding her daughter tighter. A klaxon blared from the lead transport. The convoy slowed, metal treads grinding over packed ice. The driver cursed over the intercom, static crackling. "Visibility's dead, blizzard coming in hard. Reduce speed." Snow started falling heavier. In seconds, the world beyond the cage bars turned white. The transport lights flickered, red hazard beams pulsing across the swirling storm. Wind rocked the vehicle side to side, howling through gaps in the armor plating. The guards shifted uneasily, scanning the ridges with their rifles, calling out status reports over comms. One of them muttered about hostiles in the mountains, but another snapped back that no life signs had pinged on the patrol drones. A patrol drone passed overhead with a low hum, infrared scanners sweeping the plane in pale blue beams that barely cut through the blowing snow. Aralina pressed Raimi closer, feeling the girl's thin ribs shiver under her palms. "Close your eyes," she whispered. "Rest if you can." She kept her own eyes on the cage door. 2 days ago, when they'd locked her in, she'd seen the guard slam it too hard. The weld around the old hinge had cracked, leaving a hairline seam of rusted metal. Since then, every time a guard turned his back, Aralina had tested it, pulling gently, hiding the motion under her body, searching for the point where the lock might give. She didn't have a plan beyond that. She couldn't plan. The cold was too intense, the guards too unpredictable. But if the convoy ever fell into chaos, if there was even a second where the humans turned their attention away from the cargo, she would act. Anything was better than what waited at the outpost. She'd heard the rumors, the whispered scraps of conversation that drifted past her cage at night. Buyers who liked children young, buyers who liked to watch them break. A burst of static snapped across the radio. A guard in the lead vehicle screamed something unintelligible, cut off by a low, crunching sound that sent a vibration through the convoy floor. Metal shrieked in the distance. Then firelight bloomed ahead, barely visible through the wall of falling snow. A thick black column of smoke twisted upward, lost quickly in the storm. The convoy jerked to a stop. Guards cursed, stumbling across the flatbed. Another explosion thumped through the air, muffled by the storm but strong enough to rattle the cage door. Raimi whimpered, clinging tighter to Aralina's waist. A guard screamed, his voice ragged. Lead transport is gone. Something hit it. Possible mine. Red hazard lights spun faster. Alarms blared, sharp and insistent. Guards ran to defensive positions, aiming rifles into the whiteout. Patrol drones zipped overhead, sensors blinking. Somewhere far ahead, muzzle flashes stuttered in the darkness, bright orange bursts swallowed quickly by swirling snow. Bullets cracked, echoing through the storm. Aralina felt her breath catch. The cage door rattled as the transport rocked again. She glanced at the cracked seam, at the guard leaning over the rail to aim into the snow, back turned, shouting at his squadmate. Now, there would never be a better chance. She shifted Raimi aside, ignoring the girl's soft cry of protest, and grabbed the seam with both hands. Her skin burned against the freezing metal. She pulled, arms straining, muscles quivering. The weld screeched as it tore, sparks flashing faintly in the dark. A guard spun toward her, eyes wide. He raised his rifle, mouth open to shout. She kicked the door outward, catching him in the knee. He grunted, gun clattering away. The door swung open, banging against the bars. Wind slammed into the cage, blasting snow across her skin like knives. She grabbed Raimi, lifted her in both arms, and stepped onto the flatbed. A bullet sparked off the rail beside her head. Another slammed into the cage behind her, punching through the thin metal wall. She ran, bare feet slipping on the ice-slick metal, arms wrapped around Raimi. Guard shouted. A siren shrieked from the command vehicle. She didn't look back. She reached the edge of the flatbed, leapt down into waist-deep snow. The cold hit like a hammer, stealing her breath. She almost fell, stumbled, kept moving. Snow clung to her thighs, soaking the thin silks instantly, chilling her already numb skin to the bone. She couldn't feel her toes anymore. The wind screamed so loud it was hard to think, but she forced herself forward one step at a time, dragging Raimi with her. Behind them, flashlights stabbed through the storm. Gunfire cracked in short bursts, bullets ripping through the air, but she was already down in the snow, hidden by the drifting white. The guards fired wildly into the darkness, shouting into radios. A distant explosion lit the sky for an instant, throwing stark shadows across the plain. Aralina kept moving. Her legs burned. Her lungs felt raw. Every breath tasted like blood and ice. But Raimi clung to her, whimpering softly, and that kept her going. She knew what would happen if they were caught. Humans didn't see them as mothers and daughters. They saw bodies, merchandise. Her daughter would be torn away, sold to the highest bidder, locked in some cell on another frozen world. Aralina refused to let that happen. Even if she froze to death out here, at least they'd die together free. The blizzard swallowed the world. The transport behind her vanished into white. Lights disappeared, gunfire faded. Her legs went numb, moving only because her mind screamed at them to keep going. She stumbled over something buried in the snow, an old outcropping of rock, and nearly fell. She held Raimi tight, kept moving. The girl was crying now, voice soft and ragged. "I'm so cold, Mama. I want to go home." "There's no home anymore," Aralina whispered. She hated the words even as they left her mouth. "Just hold on. We keep moving." She didn't know how long they walked. The snow deepened, rose past her hips, nearly swallowed her whole. She saw dark shapes in the storm that vanished when she blinked, phantom shadows that might have been rocks, dead trees, or patrol drones. The cold dug deep, turned her bones into brittle glass. Her arms trembled so hard she almost dropped Raimi, but she gritted her teeth, kept them locked around the girl's waist. Then she saw it. A dark crack in the white wall of a drift ahead, a shadow under the mountainside. An old tunnel mouth, half collapsed, jagged with broken stone. A mining shaft, maybe, from before the humans abandoned this sector. She staggered toward it, almost crawling the last few feet. The wind died instantly as she ducked inside, replaced by hollow silence. The tunnel smelled of old rust, stale air, frozen rock. She dropped to her knees, laying Raimi gently on the stone floor. The girl was limp, breathing shallow, lips nearly purple. Aralina rubbed her arms, her back, whispering again and again, voice hoarse and shaking. "Stay with me. Don't sleep yet." She checked the entrance. Outside, flashlights flickered past, beams cutting through the storm. Voices called out, thin and distant. Aralina flattened against the wall, one hand clamped over Raimi's mouth. The humans moved past, fading into the howling wind. She waited until their voices were gone. Then she sagged against the tunnel wall, feeling the raw scrape of stone against her skin, eyes locked on Raimi's face. Her own body was shutting down, fingers stiff, legs cramping, skin nearly blue in patches. But she couldn't let herself rest. If they came back, if the humans searched the tunnels, she had to be ready. She picked up a broken shard of rock, held it tight in her bleeding hand. Her heart thudded dully in her chest. Her body shook with cold and exhaustion, but her mind stayed sharp, locked on one thought: survive. Somehow, for Raimi. Outside, the storm swallowed every sound, a white wall of death that hid them from the convoy. But inside, Aralina could still hear Raimi's tiny, labored breaths. It was enough. She whispered one promise into the darkness, voice quiet but steady. "I will never let them take you. I don't care what it costs." She lay awake for hours, listening for the search teams, gripping the rock so hard her knuckles split and bled. But no one came. Eventually, exhaustion dragged her under, but her last thought was simple, practical, and cold. "If we're found, I fight until I die. If we're not found, I find a way out. Either way, I don't stop. Not until we're free." The cold in the tunnel seeped into Aralina's bones. The walls, rough and jagged, radiated a biting chill that clung to her skin. Her arms ached from holding Raimi, but she didn't let go. Even asleep, the girl trembled, lips parted as she breathed in quick, shallow gulps. Every so often, a tiny whimper escaped her throat, the sound scraping raw against Aralina's ears. She didn't know how long they'd been hiding. Hours, maybe more. Outside, the storm howled like a living thing, battering the tunnel mouth with steady gusts that rattled the loose stones around the entrance. No footsteps, no human voices. The searchlights had moved on. She pressed her hand against Raimi's cheek. The skin felt cold, but not lifeless. That gave Aralina a thin thread of hope, frayed and fragile, but it was enough to keep her awake. Her own eyes burned from the dry cold. Her mind drifted in and out, replaying fragments of her old life. Her village under soft green skies, the shimmer of crystal leaves in the sun, her mate's smile before the humans came. He had died in the first raid, torn apart by pulse fire. The memory cut her deeper than the wind ever could, but she forced herself to hold on to it. It reminded her why she couldn't stop. A scraping noise came from deeper in the tunnel. She stiffened, clutching the rock shard tighter in her fist. For a moment, she thought the humans had found them, that they were already here, waiting for the right moment to drag them back to the cages. But then the sound faded, replaced by the steady drip of melting ice from the ceiling. Aralina studied the dark tunnel stretching away from her. Faint shapes loomed and vanished in the blackness. Old mining carts, stacks of rusted equipment, support beams wrapped in frozen cables. She could feel the cold seeping out from the tunnel floor, up through her legs. If she stayed here too long, they'd both freeze. But moving was dangerous. Humans could be anywhere outside, searching the storm with thermal scanners. She tried to remember what little she knew of human scanners: short-range bursts, unable to penetrate deep rock layers, prone to interference from mineral deposits. If the tunnels ran far enough into the mountain, they might be safe. Her thoughts were interrupted by a sharp hiss from Raimi. The girl jerked awake, eyes wide and glassy. "Mama, it hurts," she whispered, voice so faint Aralina had to bend low to hear. "My hands, they're burning." Aralina grabbed Raimi's tiny hands. The fingertips were pale and stiff. Frostbite. Panic surged up her throat, thick and choking. She swallowed it, keeping her voice steady. "I know. I'll fix it. I promise." But she had nothing. No fire, no food, no thick clothes to wrap around Raimi's fragile body. Every minute they stayed here was another minute the cold dug deeper into the girl's skin, turning flesh to ice. She looked toward the darkness of the tunnel again. Moving deeper was the only chance they had. She lifted Raimi gently, ignoring the stabbing pain in her own legs as she stood. Her muscles screamed in protest. Carefully, she set Raimi against her hip, one arm locking the girl in place. With her free hand, she brushed the rock wall, feeling for stable ground. Then she started walking, one step at a time, into the black. Each footfall echoed. The tunnel sloped downward, and the ground grew slick with patches of frozen water. At times, she nearly slipped, catching herself on broken machinery left behind by miners decades ago. Old signs, written in human text she couldn't read, hung crooked from the walls. A thick cable snaked along the ceiling, its insulation rotted and peeling. She pushed on, teeth clenched against the cold. Every few meters, she paused, listening. Her ears strained for any hint of pursuit. Human voices, boots on stone, the hum of patrol drones, but the tunnel stayed silent, except for the slow drip of melting ice. Eventually, the darkness began to thin. A dim glow pulsed from ahead, soft and blue. She tightened her grip on Raimi and crept closer, peering around a corner. An old mining lamp flickered in the ceiling above a small storage room, casting weak blue light over crates stacked against one wall. The place was abandoned, broken tools littered the floor, and frost coated the walls in thin white sheets. A low hum buzzed from the lamp, steady but fragile, as if it might die any second. She set Raimi down gently on the floor near the crates, wrapping her arms around the girl's shoulders. The blue light made Raimi's pale violet skin look even more fragile, almost translucent. Aralina checked the boxes quickly. Most were empty, cracked open decades ago. In one, she found a few old cloth tarps, stiff with frost, but better than nothing. She wrapped one around Raimi, holding her close. Raimi leaned against her, eyes fluttering closed again. "I don't want them to take me, Mama," she murmured. "They won't," Aralina whispered, even though every instinct screamed how easily they could be found. "I'll protect you." She believed it because she had no other choice. A scraping sound echoed from the tunnel entrance they'd come through. Aralina froze, heart thudding. She snatched the rock shard again, holding it tight. A silhouette moved into the doorway, a tall figure in a thick coat, rifle held low. He paused, scanning the room slowly, eyes narrowing at the sight of Aralina and Raimi. His face was partially shadowed, but she could see stubble along his jaw, lines cut deep from cold and stress. Stephen had been with the convoy. She recognized him from the brief glimpses she'd stolen between the bars of her cage, the way he had stood apart from the other guards, the hard, tired look in his eyes. He wasn't like the others. He'd never joined in their jokes, never leered at the captives the way some of them did. Now, he lowered his rifle slightly, frowning as he took in the sight of Raimi shivering under the tarp. His voice came out rough, worn by wind and dust. "You broke out." Aralina kept the rock raised, ready to strike. Her voice shook with exhaustion. "Don't come closer." Stephen didn't move. He shifted his weight slightly, setting the rifle aside to hang on its shoulder strap. He raised both hands, palms out. "I'm not here to drag you back. If the others knew you were here, they'd be waiting in the tunnel with guns. They don't. I came alone." She didn't trust him. Humans lied easily. But the way he looked at Raimi, his eyes lingered on the girl, not with the hungry interest of a buyer, but with something closer to worry. "Why?" Aralina demanded, voice low. "You were with them. You chained us." Stephen's jaw twitched. He let out a breath, the steam curling in the cold air. "I've done worse things than guard slavers. I'm not proud of any of it. But I'm not handing over a mother and her child to those bastards. Not again. Again. The words slipped out, heavy with something that almost sounded like regret. Aralina's grip loosened slightly on the rock. Her hand throbbed with cold. If you're lying, then kill me now, Stephen cut in. His voice was steady. I'm done running from what I've done. Either help you or die trying. They stared at each other, the old mining lamp buzzing above them. Aralina's arms trembled from exhaustion and tension. Slowly, she lowered the rock, but didn't let it go completely. Stephen stepped closer, unzipping his thick coat. He shrugged it off, holding it out to her. You're going to freeze in those rags. Take this. I'll help you find a way out, but you need to trust me. At least enough to stay alive. Aralina hesitated. The cold clawed at her bones. Raimi whimpered again, curling tighter under the tarp. Finally, she snatched the coat from his hand, wrapping it around both herself and Raimi. The warmth soaked in fast, making her gasp with relief. Stephen crouched near them, careful to keep his hands visible. They'll be sweeping the outer tunnels by morning. We need to move deeper before they bring in the drones. There's old maintenance shafts farther in. If we hide there, we'll buy time until the storm clears. Then I know a way out. Aralina studied him, eyes narrow. Her voice was rough. If you try anything, I'll kill you. I'd expect nothing less, Stephen said. For the first time in days, Aralina felt something shift in her chest. It wasn't trust, not yet, but it was the faintest spark of something else. Maybe hope, maybe desperation. Either way, she needed him. She nodded once. Stephen picked up his rifle again, moving to the doorway to check the hall. His voice was low when he spoke, as if talking to himself. I should have done this sooner. She didn't know what he meant. She didn't care. All that mattered was Raimi's tiny breath against her neck, still warm, still alive. Aralina whispered into her daughter's hair, voice steady. We keep moving, no matter what. We stay free. Outside, the storm raged on, but in the dim blue glow of the mining lamp, a fragile alliance formed. In that frozen maze, they were no longer alone. The tunnel seemed to stretch forever into the mountain, each step deeper, making the walls close in tighter, the air colder, heavier. Aralina moved slowly behind Stephen, clutching Raimi to her chest. Stephen led the way with his rifle at the ready, the narrow beam of a handheld lamp sweeping over rusted rail lines, old crates, and piles of collapsed rock. No alarms blared here. No searchlights cut through the dark. But that didn't ease the tension grinding in Aralina's chest. Every scraping footstep set her on edge, her fingers tightening on the jagged rock shard she still held in one numb hand. Raimi shivered against her. The thick military coat Stephen had given them helped, but it wasn't enough to banish the deep chill that had settled into the girl's bones. The tarp was wrapped around her legs, her head tucked under Aralina's chin, small breaths damp and hot against her collarbone. They'd been walking nearly an hour. The storage room faded into memory behind them, replaced by a twisting labyrinth of old mining shafts and cross tunnels. Stephen moved with practiced calm, pausing often to listen, checking blind corners before signaling Aralina forward. At times he glanced back, his eyes lingering on Raimi with a flicker of something Aralina couldn't quite name. Guilt, maybe, or just the haunted residue of too many nights guarding women and children like them. She didn't trust him, not fully, but the way he watched the dark, the way his hands tightened on the rifle when faint echoes rattled from deeper in the shaft, it didn't look like a man waiting to betray them. It looked like a man ready to fight. Raimi coughed, a soft, wet sound that made Aralina flinch. Stephen stopped, glancing back. How's the kid? He whispered. Aralina shifted the girl slightly, adjusting the coat around her shoulders. She's alive, she murmured. She needs warmth. Food. Anything. Stephen grimaced. There's an old maintenance room up ahead. Has a heater. If it still works, we'll warm her there. Why are you doing this? Aralina asked, her voice low, brittle. Why help us now? You helped cage us before. You watched while they... Stephen turned his head, his jaw tight. I watched. I hated it. Didn't matter. We needed credits to get off this rock. That's what I told myself. That's what all of them tell themselves. But there was a boy, years ago, on another job. He was younger than your kid. He died in a cage while I stood guard. I told myself that was how things worked, but never left me. He didn't elaborate. He turned and kept walking, shoulders hunched. Aralina studied him in silence. The humans had taken everything from her, her mate, her home, the future she wanted for Raimi. Nothing would change that. But here, in this cold, dark place, with Raimi's thin heartbeat fluttering against her chest, she understood one thing with painful clarity. Survival sometimes came from the most unlikely hands. The shaft bent left, opening into a wider chamber. Old tracks split in 3 directions, signs with faded human text hanging crooked overhead. Stephen pointed left. Maintenance hub is this way. They passed old drill rigs, their hydraulic arms frozen mid-motion, ice crusted over steel. Stephen pulled open a small door marked with peeling hazard stripes. Inside, the air felt marginally warmer. An old heater sat against the wall, dark and covered in frost. Stephen knelt beside it, fiddling with the rusted controls. Sparks sputtered once, then again, before a thin glow spread across the coils. A low hum filled the room. Aralina sank to the floor with Raimi, pulling her closer to the weak warmth. The girl stirred, moaning softly. Stephen glanced back, eyes tired. She needs food. I've got some ration packs. He dug through his belt pouch, pulling out 2 small vacuum-sealed bars. Aralina took one, tearing the plastic with her teeth, breaking off a chunk for Raimi. The girl chewed slowly, eyes half shut, but color began to return to her cheeks. Why do they want us? Raimi whispered, voice cracked from cold and hunger. Stephen looked at her, then at Aralina. His voice stayed quiet. Because there's money in it. Because the men at that outpost will pay anything for something rare. Different. You're not the first. You wouldn't be the last. Aralina clenched her jaw so hard it hurt. That's all we are to them. A commodity. Stephen didn't look away. Yes, that's exactly what they see. Raimi whimpered, curling tighter against Aralina's chest. The heater hummed louder, spreading faint warmth through the tiny room. For the first time since the blizzard began, Aralina felt the edge of numbness pulled back from her fingertips. Stephen moved to the doorway, peering out into the tunnel, rifle ready. They'll sweep the upper tunnels at first light. They'll find a broken cage. They'll trace you this far. We have to go deeper before then. How far does this place go? Aralina asked. Stephen rubbed his gloved thumb over the rifle grip. Old maps say the mine runs for kilometers. There's a ventilation shaft that cuts to the other side of the ridge. We make it there, we find a path out into the valleys. Then I know someone with a ship hidden near an old outpost. It's risky, but it's the only chance. Why do you care? Aralina said, why throw your life away for us? Stephen's jaw tensed. Because I've done worse. Because I'm done watching good people suffer so scum can get rich. Because if I leave you here, it's one more cage I never broke. He didn't wait for her answer. He turned, scanning the tunnel beyond. Aralina looked at Raimi, brushing a lock of white hair from her damp forehead. We'll move again soon, she whispered. Stay awake. Stay strong. Raimi nodded weakly, chewing another piece of the ration bar. Her voice was so soft Aralina barely heard it. Will he protect us? Aralina watched Stephen's silhouette framed in the doorway, rifle raised, shoulders tight with tension. Her heart still burned with hatred, but another feeling crept in alongside it. Uncertain, grudging hope. I don't know, she whispered, but we don't have another choice. Stephen spoke without turning around. They've got drones sweeping the upper levels already. We need to move. He led them out of the room, down another sloping shaft. The heater's glow faded behind them, swallowed by the dark. Aralina shifted Raimi to her hip again, clutching her with one hand, the rock shard in the other. The tunnel twisted, narrowing so tight they had to squeeze sideways past old mining equipment, stepping over frozen pipes. At one point, Stephen stopped them, gesturing for silence. Voices echoed faintly down a branching shaft. Guards, close enough Aralina could hear the clatter of metal as they walked, the static crackle of radios. Stephen pressed a finger to his lips, motioning for Aralina to duck into an old side passage. They crouched in the shadows, Aralina's heart hammering so loud she worried the humans would hear it. Raimi whimpered once. Aralina clamped a hand over her mouth gently, whispering into her ear to be still. Two guards passed the passage entrance, rifles sweeping back and forth. Their breath fogged the air. One spat on the ground, muttering, "They can't have gotten far." The dam scanners picked up faint heat. "They're in here somewhere." Stephen stayed frozen, barely breathing, until the guards moved on. He exhaled slowly, then turned back to Aralina. "They're using short-range thermal. As long as we stay near this old machinery, the residual metal heat screws with their readings. That's our cover, but it won't last." They moved again, deeper, past old storage rooms and half-collapsed shafts. The ground grew slick with black ice, forcing them to crawl in places. Stephen helped Aralina lift Raimi over a collapsed beam, never meeting her eyes, but steady in his grip, careful not to jostle the girl more than necessary. Every so often, Raimi whimpered in pain, but Aralina murmured reassurances, focusing on the next step and the next. In the dark, under rock older than any of their wars, Aralina realized what terrified her most wasn't the humans behind them. It was the idea that if she stopped moving, if she faltered, Raimi would die here, alone, frozen, and forgotten. She wouldn't allow that. Hours later, they reached another maintenance room, this one long abandoned, the door hanging loose on one hinge. Stephen eased them inside, setting his rifle against the wall. "We rest here. 2 hours, no more. Then we move again." Aralina sank to the floor, pulling Raimi close. Stephen crouched near the doorway, checking the corridor again and again. He didn't speak. His face looked harder than before, eyes shadowed and distant, as if staring at things she couldn't see. Aralina hated him a little less in that moment. She whispered to Raimi, rocking her gently, "We'll make it out. I swear it. No cage. No chains." Raimi's eyes fluttered open, just for a second. "I believe you," she breathed. Aralina held her tighter, ignoring the sting of fresh tears on her frozen cheeks. Stephen muttered from the doorway, voice low. "No one should have to fight this hard just to be free. No one." In the dark, that simple sentence cut deeper than any blade. And for the first time since the humans had burned her village, Aralina allowed herself to imagine something other than running. Something like a future. In the silence, she whispered one word into Raimi's hair, a promise barely louder than a breath. Freedom. They left the maintenance room just before dawn, when the first pale streaks of light filtered through cracks in the tunnel ceiling far above. The air had grown colder again, the frozen walls dripping in thin rivulets that froze before hitting the ground. Stephen led the way, moving with tense precision, eyes constantly scanning every shadow, every pile of rusted machinery. Aralina stayed close behind, carrying Raimi, whose head lolled against her shoulder, feverish and weak. Stephen kept his voice low as they walked. "They'll expect you to stay near the lower shafts. They'll post guards on the ridge tunnels and funnel you toward capture teams. We have to take a path they won't think we'd risk." Aralina's voice was raw from whispering soothing words to Raimi all night. "Where?" "Back toward the upper shafts, close to the patrol routes. There's an old ventilation corridor that cuts under the ridge. It's narrow, unstable, but it comes out near a landing bay I used back in the war. My old ship is there, buried under snowdrifts. We get there, we have a chance." She didn't question him further. She was too tired, too scared. But as they moved, weaving through tight passages, stepping over broken rails, she thought about everything they'd survived so far and forced her legs to keep moving. She would not let Raimi die in this frozen maze. Not after everything they'd endured. The upper shafts were tighter than the lower tunnels. The walls squeezed close around them, rough stone brushing Stephen's shoulders as he walked. The floors sloped upward, icy and slick. Several times, Stephen had to help Aralina over old cave-ins, his rough, calloused hands steady on her arms. Each time he touched her, she felt a jolt of uncertainty. He was human. He was part of the convoy that had caged her. But his grip was gentle, his eyes never straying to her exposed skin, never showing that hungry gleam she'd seen in other men. That was enough for now. As they climbed, Stephen paused suddenly, raising a fist. A faint hum echoed down the shaft ahead. He signaled for silence, moving forward on soft boots until he reached a crack in the stone wall. He peered through, then ducked back, cursing under his breath. "Drone patrol," he whispered. They've got the corridor ahead blocked. 2 guards, 3 drones sweeping with thermal. Aralina's pulse quickened. "Can we go around?" Stephen shook his head. "Not here. We wait, or we make noise somewhere else, pull them away." She didn't like the second option. Any noise meant more humans. More guns. More chance Raimi would be caught in the crossfire. She hugged her daughter tighter, whispering in her ear, "Stay awake, little star. Stay with me." Raimi stirred, her voice small. "I'm tired, Mama." "I know," Aralina breathed. "But we keep going. I need you with me." Stephen touched her arm lightly, surprising her. "I can handle the diversion," he said. "You stay here. If I'm not back in 10 minutes, you head deeper into the side tunnels. They'll be looking for me, not you." "You'll get caught," she hissed. "Maybe," he said, giving her a wry smile. "Maybe not. Either way, it gives you time. And time is the only thing that matters." He slipped away before she could argue, ducking low and vanishing into the dark. Aralina crouched near the wall, trying to steady her breathing. Every second dragged on her nerves, stretching thin the brittle thread of her hope. Raimi whimpered once, clutching the edge of the coat Stephen had given them. Aralina murmured reassurances, keeping her ears tuned for footsteps, gunfire, anything. Minutes passed. Then, suddenly, shouts erupted in the corridor beyond. Muffled gunfire rattled off stone walls. A bright flash lit the crack in the rock, followed by a concussive thump that shook dust loose from the ceiling. Aralina flinched, clutching Raimi tighter. Voices barked orders. Boots pounded away from the corridor entrance. One of the drones zipped past the crack, scanning wildly with its blue beam. Then the corridor fell silent again. Stephen reappeared, blood trickling from a cut along his temple, breath coming in ragged bursts. "They're moving down the secondary shaft. We've got maybe 3 minutes." He didn't wait for her answer. He led them forward, ducking into the corridor. The path was clear. 2 dead guards lay slumped against the wall, their rifles knocked aside. Stephen didn't look at them as he passed, eyes fixed ahead. Aralina hesitated, staring at the bodies. Part of her wanted to spit on them, curse them, but there was no time. She hurried after Stephen, following him into the narrow ventilation corridor he described. The corridor was barely a meter wide, walls slick with condensation. Every breath echoed in the tight space, mixing with the soft whimper of Raimi's voice. Halfway through, the passage tilted steeply downward. Stephen moved first, sliding carefully on his boots, checking each step before motioning her forward. She followed, feeling the smooth ice under her bare feet. At the bottom, the corridor opened into another shaft, this one wider, scattered with broken crates and old fuel drums. The ceiling had partially collapsed, blocking half the space with jagged rock. Stephen led them behind the fallen debris, crouching low. He checked his battered wrist scanner, then looked at her. "The patrols will be back in this sector soon. They'll check every shaft, but there's an old emergency lift on the other side of this blockage. We get working, we're out." Then it's a sprint across open snow to the ridge. That's where the ship is buried. Aralina nodded once, though the fear churning in her gut made it hard to think. "How far?" "Maybe 4 kilometers, Stephen said. All out in the open. No cover. But the blizzard is coming back. That's our window." As he spoke, Raimi coughed again, her small body shuddering. Aralina brushed her cheek with shaking fingers. "I can't run that far with her like this," she whispered. "She's burning up." Stephen's expression darkened. "There's medical supplies on the ship. Stims, anti-shock injectors. We just have to make it there." He moved to the old lift console, prying open the rusted panel with a combat knife. Sparks flickered as he worked, wires hissing in the cold. Aralina watched, heart in her throat, half expecting guards to burst in at any second. "What happens when we get there?" she asked quietly. "What then?" Stephen didn't look up. "We fly. Off this rock. I know a place. Old Colony Station. Quiet. Lawless. Nobody asks questions. You'll be safe there. Both of you. Why help us? She pressed again, her voice tight. You could run now. You could leave us to die. He paused, staring into the console's mess of wires. His voice was low. Because I've got enough ghosts on my conscience. I'm done adding more. The lift groaned to life with a juddering clang. Stephen ducked back, grabbing his rifle. Get ready, he hissed. We're moving now. He led them onto the rattling platform, hitting the control switch. The lift lurched upward, grinding through old gears. Dust rained down from the shaft walls, making Raimi cough again. Aralina held her close, every muscle tense, staring at the shadows sliding past as they rose. Halfway up, a bright light speared through a gap in the shaft wall, searchlight beams sweeping the tunnels. Stephen hissed a curse. They're close. Be ready to run. The lift slammed to a stop at the top, the doors half jammed with rust. Stephen kicked them open, motioning her forward. The corridor beyond was wide, the floor covered in old crates and frozen drifts of snow that had blown in through cracks in the ceiling. Beyond that lay a wide opening to the surface, where blinding white light spilled in under low clouds. The wind howled through the gap, whipping at their faces. Aralina staggered forward, nearly dropping Raimi from exhaustion. Stephen grabbed her arm, steadying her. They'll be on us any second, he growled. Go! They sprinted out into the blizzard, snow blasting across their faces. Behind them, shouts echoed, muffled by the howling wind. A warning siren wailed faintly from somewhere in the tunnels, swallowed quickly by the storm. Stephen led the way across the flat expanse of ice, boots crunching in knee-deep snow. Aralina stumbled after him, her lungs burning, every step sending a shock of pain through her frozen legs. Raimi moaned softly, her head rolling against Aralina's shoulder. Bullets cracked in the distance, streaking past like angry hornets. Stephen ducked low, firing back once with short, precise bursts. Ahead, a faint shape loomed in the white, a dark mound half buried in drifting snow. The old ship, its hull scarred and frost-covered, looked like a giant frozen animal sleeping in the ice. Stephen reached the hatch first, wrenching it open. He waved her forward, covering her with his rifle as she staggered inside. The ship's interior was pitch black, the metal walls coated in rime. He slammed the hatch shut behind them, bolting it tight. Panting, Stephen leaned against the door, sweat freezing on his forehead. We're not safe yet, he panted. They'll surround us. We have to get this bird in the air. Aralina sank to her knees, clutching Raimi. The girl's breathing was shallow, skin flushed with fever. Aralina's hands trembled as she whispered into her ear, voice shaking. Stay with me. Don't you leave me, little star. Stephen moved to the cockpit, slamming switches. Old consoles sputtered to life, flickering dim green light across the narrow cabin. Warning alarms blared, echoing in the metal walls. Outside, the wind howled louder. Shouts and muffled gunfire pounded at the hull. But inside the frozen ship, the hum of power growing under Stephen's hands was the first real sign of hope Aralina had felt in days. She stared at Stephen's back as he worked, her voice a ragged whisper. You'd better be right about this. Stephen didn't look back. I will be, he said, his voice steady for the first time since they met. I have to be. The ship rattled as Stephen flipped switches, old circuits buzzing awake one by one. A faded green glow pulsed over the cracked control panels, casting ghostly light across the narrow cockpit. Frost hissed and steamed off the dashboard as old heating coils sputtered to life. Outside, muffled gunfire crackled, thudding against the hull in irregular bursts. Aralina knelt in the corridor, clutching Raimi to her chest. The girl's skin burned with fever, her breath shallow and rapid. Aralina felt helpless fury twist in her gut. Every part of her ached, but she held Raimi tighter, whispering over and over, Stay with me. Just a little longer. Stephen leaned into the co-pilot's seat, muttering curses as he fought the unresponsive controls. Old fuel cells are half dead. Hydraulics frozen solid, come on. You bastard, move. He He pounded the side console, and something deep in the ship groaned to life with a jolt that rattled the floor under Aralina's knees. Outside, voices shouted, distorted by the wind and thick hull plating. A sharp clang rang through the metal as someone tried to pry the main hatch. Stephen's voice cut through the rising panic in Aralina's head. "They're breaching. I can lift us, but we'll be dead weight in the air until I break the gear loose. Hold her tight." A sudden jolt slammed through the ship as Stephen yanked a lever. A high whine built under the floor, a vibration that made Aralina's teeth ache. The old engine sputtered, coughed, then roared, sending a shudder through the hull. Stephen didn't stop moving, sweat dripping down his temple. "We've got seconds before they cut through that door," he said. "I'm breaking the seal. Hang on." With a deafening screech, the landing clamps tore free of the ice. The ship lurched upward, snow sliding off the hull in a blinding white wave. A loud bang rang from the hatch as it ripped halfway open. Cold air blasted inside, along with a hail of gunfire. Bullets sparked off the corridor wall, one punching a whole inches from Aralina's head. Stephen spun in his chair, firing a short burst with his rifle. "Stay down." The attackers fell back, the hatch flapping uselessly in the storm wind. Stephen turned back to the controls, slamming the throttle forward. The ship lifted higher, engines howling. Outside, the ground fell away, the white plane vanishing in a swirling blizzard. The hull rattled as stray gunfire snapped past, but Stephen didn't let up. "Landing gears jammed in ice," he growled. "I can't retract it. I'm going to take us low across the ridge. If they follow, the snowdrift will mask our heat signature." Aralina staggered into the cockpit, holding Raimi. She set the girl carefully in the narrow co-pilot's seat, brushing her sweaty hair off her forehead. Raimi's eyes fluttered open, unfocused. "Mama, it hurts." "I know," Aralina whispered. "Stay with me. We're almost free." Stephen flicked a series of switches. "I'm rerouting power to the aft shields. If they try to lock weapons, it'll buy us a few seconds." Aralina looked at him sharply. "They have flyers?" "Convoy commander doesn't give up easy," Stephen said. "They'll scramble patrol craft, light weapons, maybe worse. We're not out yet." The cockpit window filled with white as they skimmed low over the ridge, wind screaming past the hull. Ahead, jagged black rocks jutted through the snow, brief flashes of stark stone amid the endless drift. Aralina clutched the seat back, feeling the ship tilt and sway. Raimi moaned softly beside her. A sudden ping echoed from the console, a shrill alarm that made Stephen curse. "Contacts on the scope," he spat. "Two pursuit craft. They're locking missiles. I need you to hold this stick steady." Aralina froze. "I don't know how." "Just hold it centered," Stephen snapped, grabbing a side panel and tearing it open. He pulled a bundle of wires out, hands moving fast. Sparks jumped as he twisted them together, rerouting old circuits. The ship jolted again as distant explosions flashed outside. "They're firing on us," Aralina said, voice tight. "I know," Stephen growled. "Keep her steady." The stick jumped under her grip as the ship shuddered. A flicker of fear twisted through her chest, but she forced her hands to stay locked, eyes on the horizon. Stephen ducked under the console, yanking out a burn component and slamming a new one into place. "There," he gasped, climbing back up. "Shield capacitors back online. Hold on." He shoved her aside gently, grabbing the stick and wrenching it left. The ship banked hard, a burst of cannon fire ripping past the cockpit window, so close it rattled the glass. Stephen leveled out, breathing hard. "One more pass," he muttered. "We lose them in the canyon." He nosed the ship downward, engines howling. A deep black slit opened in the snow ahead, a winding canyon between two jagged ridges. The pursuit craft dove after them, streaks of red plasma, fire searing past the hull. Stephen grit his teeth, hands tight on the controls. They can't risk missiles this low. Rocks will screw with their targeting. But one good shot and we're done. Aralina held Raimi's hand, squeezing hard. "Stay awake," she whispered. "We're almost there." The ship screamed through the canyon, snow and ice bursting off the rock walls as they skimmed barely meters from the jagged edges. Stephen banked left, then right, dodging tight curves. Behind them, the pursuit craft struggled to keep up, their engines roaring through the blizzard. A sudden burst of cannon fire rocked the ship, alarms blaring. Stephen swore. "Port engines hit," he said. "We're losing power." Aralina's heart thudded so loud she thought it would crack her ribs. "What happens now?" Stephen jerked the stick again, dodging another burst of fire. "We find the narrowest part of the canyon," he said through clenched teeth. "We let the rocks do the work." He angled the ship downward, skimming so close to the canyon floor that snow burst into white plumes under the hull. The pursuit craft followed, weapons glowing hot. Stephen twisted the controls, sending the ship into a spiraling climb up the canyon wall. The lead pursuit craft tried to match the move, but clipped the jagged rock edge. A fireball erupted behind them, shaking the canyon. Stephen grinned grimly. One down. The second craft pulled up, firing wildly. A bolt of plasma ripped across the aft shields, making the ship jolt violently. Stephen hissed, smoke pouring from the rear console. "We're running out of time," he panted. He dove again, this time cutting the engines completely. The ship fell like a stone, scraping the canyon wall so close that sparks showered past the cockpit. The second pursuit craft overshot them, banking hard to avoid the rock face. Stephen slammed the throttle forward, igniting the engines again. The sudden blast shot them up and out of the canyon mouth into the open sky. The second pursuit craft tried to follow, but its wing clipped the canyon edge, sending it spinning out of control. Stephen let out a breath as the pursuing explosion faded behind them. "Clear," he whispered. "For now." He slumped back in the chair, sweat dripping from his chin. Aralina exhaled, her arms shaking. She looked down at Raimi, whose eyes had closed, breath rattling in her chest. Stephen checked the scanner. "We've got maybe 20 minutes before they regroup," he said. "I'll push this old bird as hard as she'll go. You find a med kit in the rear locker. Should be a stim injector in there. It'll help your kid." Aralina didn't wait. She bolted back into the corridor, nearly tripping over the uneven metal floor. She found the locker, tearing it open with shaking hands. Inside, packed tight between faded ration packs and old grenades, lay a dusty med kit. She ripped it open, grabbing the injector. She returned to the cockpit, jabbing the stim into Raimi's thigh. The girl jerked, eyes snapping open. Color flushed into her cheeks, her breathing steadying. Aralina sagged against the seat, tears streaming down her face. "Stay with me," she whispered. "Don't leave me." Stephen didn't look back. His voice came out flat, tired. "We're not safe yet, but we're closer. You did good." Outside, the endless white plain rolled by, broken only by black ridges and swirling storms on the horizon. Ahead, hidden in the drifting snow, lay the border of the human sector, a no-man's land of disputed territory and half-forgotten treaties. If they made it across, they had a chance. Stephen locked his eyes on the forward display. "I promised you freedom," he muttered. "I'm going to keep that promise." Aralina squeezed Raimi's hand, her voice ragged but firm. "We keep moving," she said. "We never stop." Behind them, the burning wreckage of the pursuit craft faded into the storm. Ahead, the empty sky waited. The ship thundered through the sky, engines screaming in protest. Stephen's hands gripped the controls, eyes locked on the forward display, where static flickered over old targeting systems. His jaw was set hard, sweat dripping down his temple as he forced the battered vessel higher, away from the frozen plains below. Behind him, Aralina held Raimi close in the narrow corridor. The girl was breathing steadier now, the stim keeping her awake, though her skin still burned with fever. Aralina could feel each shallow breath against her arm, could feel the heat radiating from the girl's fragile body. Her own exhaustion gnawed at her muscles, but she refused to sit. Every second, she watched the ship walls, listening for the dull thud of cannon fire or the high-pitched whine of incoming pursuit craft. Stephen spoke over his shoulder, voice low and tense. "We're clear for now, but we can't stay airborne long. Power cells are burning out fast. We need to refuel and run repairs before they catch us again." Aralina swallowed hard. "Where?" old outpost, half buried in snow about 20 clicks north, Steven said. I had a stash there from my mercenary days. Fuel, supplies, parts. We hole up, fix what we can, then break orbit. He didn't mention how risky it was. He didn't have to. The old ship shuddered with every gust of wind, the battered hull moaning under the strain of acceleration. Red warning lights flickered over the console, casting the cockpit in sickly pulses of color. Raimi stirred weakly against Aralina's chest, mumbling. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere safe," Aralina whispered. She brushed the girl's sweat-soaked hair back gently. "Somewhere they can't find us." Outside, the storm clouds broke just long enough for Aralina to glimpse the landscape below, an endless field of broken ice ridges and frozen rivers, jagged and hostile. Nothing lived out there, not without heated shelters and supply drops. The humans called it Sector Gray, too unstable for settlements, but perfect for hiding smugglers and old mercenary ships. Steven banked the ship low, cutting speed as the old outpost came into view, a squat building half collapsed under a snowdrift, rusted antenna jutting from the roof. The landing pad beside it was covered in ice, cracked and pitted with old blaster scars. He guided the ship down carefully, landing gear screeching as it extended. The ship touched the pad hard, bouncing once before settling with a metallic groan. Steven shut down the engines, exhaling slowly. "We're here," he said, standing and grabbing his rifle. "Stay with her. I'll check the perimeter." Aralina watched him go, eyes narrowed. She didn't fully trust him, but he had kept them alive this far. That counted for something. Steven moved outside quickly, rifle raised, scanning the snow-swept landing pad. The wind howled across the ice, kicking up white dust that stung his face. He checked the outpost doors, still sealed, security panel dark. He keyed in an old code, and the door creaked open, a puff of stale air blasting out. Inside, the outpost was pitch black, save for the dim glow of emergency lights flickering along the floor. Steven moved through the rooms, boots crunching over shattered glass and old crates. He checked supply lockers, confirming that the spare fuel cells and med packs he'd stashed years ago were still there. Relief pulsed in his chest. Finally, something was going right. He keyed the radio on his shoulder, voice low. "It's clear. Bring her in." Aralina emerged from the ship, Raimi limp in her arms, wrapped in the thick military coat. Snow blasted across the landing pad, stinging Aralina's exposed skin, but she barely noticed. Her eyes never left Steven as he motioned them inside. The door hissed shut behind them, cutting off the wind. Steven led them to a small storage room lit by a single working overhead lamp. "Set her here," he said, pulling old tarps off a cot. Aralina laid Raimi down gently, brushing her forehead. The girl shivered, sweat dripping down her temples. Steven handed Aralina a med pack. "Antibiotics. Won't cure her fully, but it'll slow the fever until we find real help." Aralina took the injector without a word, pressing it against Raimi's neck. The girl whimpered, eyes fluttering, but her breathing steadied. Steven knelt beside the cot, voice soft. "She's strong. Like her mother." Aralina looked at him, searching his face for the lie. But there was nothing in his eyes except exhaustion and something else, guilt, maybe, or regret. "Why did you stash supplies here?" she asked quietly. Steven rubbed the back of his neck. "After the war ended, I didn't know what to do. I took whatever dirty jobs came along, guarding cargo, running guns, slave convoys. Hated every second of it, but I kept stashes like this one all over the sector, just in case I ever needed to run." He looked at her, voice low. "I didn't think I'd use them to save anyone else. But here we are." Aralina studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded once. "You're not like the others," she whispered. Steven barked a soft, humorless laugh. "I was. Maybe I still am. Doesn't matter. I'm helping you now. That's all I can do." He stood, moving back toward the door. "I'll refuel the ship. You stay here with her. Shout if you hear anything." Aralina stayed by Raimi's side, brushing sweat from her face, whispering quiet reassurances. But deep in her gut, fear still gnawed. She didn't know this place. She didn't trust the silence in the halls. She didn't trust the flickering lights or the way the wind battered the outer walls. She didn't trust humans. Minutes passed. Then Steven's voice crackled over the radio. Urgent. Aralina, trouble. Stay locked in the room. Don't open the door for anyone but me. She froze. What's wrong? Old mercenary team. Steven hissed, breath ragged. They were watching the outpost. My former squad. They tracked my old transponder code. A burst of gunfire crackled over the radio, cutting him off. Aralina's pulse spiked. She grabbed Raimi, pulling the girl into her lap. Footsteps echoed outside, boots crunching on metal. A man's voice boomed through the hall. Steven, we know you're in here. Open up the supply room. We just want the cargo. Give us the alien and the kid, and you can walk. Aralina felt bile rise in her throat. She clutched the broken rock shard tighter in one hand, the other wrapped protectively around Raimi. Steven's voice roared from somewhere in the hall. Back off. You want them, you'll have to kill me first. The mercenary laughed. We expected you'd say that. Gunfire erupted again, bullets thudding into the walls. The overhead lamp flickered. Raimi whimpered, clinging to Aralina's arm. Steven's voice crackled over the radio, breathless. I'm pinned near the engine room. They're trying to flank me. Hold that door, no matter what. I'll get back to you. Aralina whispered to Raimi, voice shaking. Stay quiet. Stay still. Boots thudded outside the room, shadows moving past the gap under the door. The mercenary leader's voice boomed again, closer this time. We don't need you, Steven. Just the woman and the kid. Give them up and we let you live. Steven's voice cut through the radio again, low and fierce. He's lying. They'll kill you. They'll kill me. Hold the door. A long pause. Then the mercenary leader sighed. Fine. We'll do this the hard way. A loud bang rattled the door, someone slamming into it with a shoulder. Metal creaked, the old hinges squealing. Aralina clutched Raimi tighter, backing away from the door. The latch held, but each slam sent vibrations through the walls, dust falling from the ceiling. A burst of gunfire cut through the hall, followed by a man's strangled scream. Then silence. Steven kicked the door open from the outside, rifle in one hand, blood streaking down his temple. His voice was ragged. We have to move. Now. Aralina didn't hesitate. She lifted Raimi, following him out into the corridor. Two mercenaries lay slumped against the wall, blood pooling under their bodies. Steven didn't look at them as he led her down the hall, boots crunching over broken glass. Ship's fueled, he gasped. We get there, we lift off. If they regroup, we won't get another chance. A loud clang echoed from deeper in the outpost. Another squad kicking in doors, shouting. Steven pulled Aralina into a side corridor, motioning for silence. They'll block the landing pad, he whispered. We go through the old maintenance tunnels. They run under the pad, come out near the landing gear. Aralina nodded once. She didn't trust him completely, but right now, he was the only chance they had. Steven led them into the maintenance shafts, ducking low under dangling cables and rusted beams. Gunfire cracked overhead as mercenaries swept the main halls, searching for them. The tunnel walls dripped with condensation, the floors slick with old oil. Finally, they reached a narrow crawl space that led upward. Light filtered through cracks above, dim daylight, gray and cold. Steven gestured. That's the pad. Go. I'll cover you. Aralina scrambled up first, dragging Raimi with her. The opening burst outward into the blinding white of the landing pad, snow and ice swirling around them. Steven followed, firing a short burst at the mercenaries behind them before slamming the crawlspace hatch shut. Run, he roared. They sprinted across the pad, boots slipping on ice. A blast of gunfire cracked past Aralina's ear, but she didn't stop. Steven covered her, firing over his shoulder as they ran. The ship loomed ahead, engines whining as they powered up. Steven reached the hatch first, throwing it open. He pushed Aralina and Raimi inside, then jumped in after them, slamming the hatch shut. Bullets thudded into the hull as he sprinted to the cockpit, hitting the lift sequence. The ship jolted upward, snow blasting off the pad. A final burst of gunfire rattled against the hull, then faded as they cleared the outpost roof engines roaring. Aralina clutched Raimi tight in the corridor, staring at Steven through the cockpit door. His voice rang out, strong and steady. "We're clear. They can't follow us up here. We're getting out." Aralina closed her eyes, letting out a long, ragged breath. She didn't know where they were going. She didn't know what waited for them out in the void. But for the first time, she believed they might actually be free. The old ship shuddered as it climbed through the upper atmosphere, the hull rattling under the strain of the icy winds that howled around them. Warning lights flickered across the cracked console, but Stephen kept one hand steady on the controls, guiding the battered vessel higher. His eyes locked on the forward display, where the sky shifted from storm gray to an endless, starlit black. In the corridor, Aralina cradled Raimi against her chest, feeling the steady rise and fall of her daughter's breathing. The fever had broken, but Raimi was weak, eyelids fluttering as she stared at the ceiling. Aralina's arms ached from holding her so long, but she refused to let go. She could still smell the gunpowder and smoke from the mercenary ambush below, still hear the crack of gunfire echoing through the halls of the outpost. But here, in the thin metal shell of this old smuggler's ship, she felt something new, a cautious, fragile sense that they had truly slipped free of the humans who had caged them, sold them, tried to break them. For the first time in weeks, no alarms blared overhead. No guards barked orders. No cage door waited to slam shut. Stephen's voice cut through her thoughts. "Strap in," he called from the cockpit. "We're pushing the engines hard. Might get rough." Aralina lay Raimi gently on the floor, buckling the harness around the girl's frail shoulders. Then she settled beside her, securing her own belt. She looked forward through the cracked bulkhead as Stephen hunched over the console, his face hard with focus, hands flying across the switches and levers. Outside the cockpit window, the stars spread in every direction, an ocean of black dotted with pinpricks of pale light. A sudden jolt rocked the ship, the metal groaning as they broke free of the last tendrils of the planet's upper atmosphere. Stephen muttered under his breath, adjusting the throttle. Come on, just hold together a little longer." The vibration eased. The rumble of the engines smoothed out into a steady hum. Stephen exhaled, slumping in his seat. "We're clear," he said. "They won't follow us up here. They wouldn't dare cross the blockade line." Aralina loosened the harness enough to reach out and brush Raimi's cheek. The girl looked at her, eyes clearer than they'd been in days. "Are we safe now?" she whispered. Aralina swallowed hard, fighting back the tears that had been building in her throat since the firefight on the landing pad. "Yes," she said softly. "We're safe." Stephen turned in his seat, eyes meeting Aralina's. His voice was hoarse but steady. "We've got enough fuel to make it to the outer rim. There's a trade station there. No colonial patrols, no slavers, just drifters and cargo haulers. I know someone who can set us up with new IDs, clean papers, off-grid housing. After that, it's your call." Aralina studied him, her pulse still thudding hard in her neck. "Why are you doing this?" she asked again, her voice raw. "You don't owe us anything." Stephen leaned back, staring at the ceiling, his eyes distant. "Because I spent years working for bastards like the ones who caged you. I guarded shipments I knew were women and children, packed into cargo holds like livestock. Told myself I needed the credits. Told myself I didn't have a choice." He looked at her again, jaw tight. "But it wasn't true. There's always a choice. This is me trying to pay some of that back." Aralina felt the anger and grief twist her chest. The memories of her village burning, the sound of her mate's screams, the iron bars of the convoy cage, all of it burned in her mind. But Stephen's voice, quiet and steady, cut through the fury like a blade through cloth. She didn't forgive him. She couldn't, but she believed him. "Thank you," she said finally. The words felt strange in her mouth, but true. Stephen nodded once, turning back to the console. He flicked switches, guiding the ship onto a new heading. The stars shifted slowly as they veered toward the outer rim, away from the frozen planet that had nearly been their grave. Aralina unbuckled herself carefully, pulling Raimi into her lap again. The girl was heavier than she remembered, but that was just exhaustion. Raimi tucked her head against Aralina's chest, whispering, "I want to go home." Aralina held her tighter, pressing her lips to the girl's soft white hair. "We will," she whispered. "I don't know where yet, but we'll find it. A place where no one can touch us." The cockpit fell quiet, the hum of the engines their only company. Stephen guided the ship smoothly through the drifting void, his shoulders slumping as the tension bled from his muscles. For the first time, Aralina noticed how tired he looked, older than his years, lines etched deep into his face, his eyes shadowed by old nightmares. She didn't trust humans. Not really, but she trusted that he wanted them to survive. And right now, that was enough. Hours passed in silence. Raimi drifted in and out of sleep. Aralina stayed awake, watching the endless stars slide past the small viewport. She replayed every moment of their escape, every near capture, every gunfight and sprint through snow. Each memory left a scar on her mind, but each was proof that they had endured, that they had survived. Stephen's voice broke the silence as he keyed the intercom. "We're coming up on the trade station. It's old, mostly abandoned, but there's a mechanic I trust. We set down there, fix what we can, and figure out next steps." Aralina looked out the window, seeing the faint gleam of metal growing brighter in the distance. A huge ring-shaped structure drifting in the void, its hull patched and scarred by old battles. A few dim lights blinked along its surface, but no patrol ships waited nearby. She nodded once, murmuring, "Do it." Stephen guided the ship carefully toward one of the station's hangar bays. The station's ancient docking claws latched onto the ship with a loud metallic thunk, pulling them slowly into the pressurized docking bay. The engines powered down, the cabin filling with sudden silence. Stephen exhaled, rubbing his eyes. He stood, grabbing his rifle. "I'll go talk to the dockmaster. You stay here until I clear it." Aralina watched him go, then turned her attention back to Raimi. The girl blinked up at her, pale but awake. "Where are we?" she whispered. "Somewhere better," Aralina said softly. "Somewhere we'll rest. Somewhere you'll be warm." Raimi closed her eyes again, breathing steady. Aralina brushed her hair back gently, a quiet resolve hardening in her chest. No more cages. No more running. She would find a place where her daughter could grow up under open skies, where no man could chain them again. Minutes later, Stephen returned, breathing a little easier. "It's clear," he said. "I've got a friend on this station. We're going to refuel and get some med supplies. I can arrange new IDs for you. Change your ship registry. After that, you're free to go wherever you want." Aralina studied him carefully. "And you?" Stephen shrugged, the faintest smile on his lips. "I'll figure out. Maybe I keep running. Maybe I find another ship that needs a gun. But I'm done with slavers. Done with convoys." Aralina stood, cradling Raimi. "We'll need each other, at least for now," she said softly. "Until I'm sure they're not coming for us." Stephen nodded once. "Then we stick together. For as long as you want." Together, they stepped out into the station's dim corridors, the air stale and metallic, the lights flickering overhead. But it felt like stepping out into sunlight after too long in a cave. Aralina held Raimi close, Stephen moving at her side. There were no guards, no chains, no prison bars waiting in this place. Just the hum of old machinery and the slow creak of aging metal. And for the first time in weeks, Aralina felt something like peace begin to thaw the ice that had frozen around her heart. They moved deeper into the station, toward whatever future waited in the drifting stars beyond. There was no question anymore. No doubt. No fear of the convoy hunting them through the snow. They were free, and nothing would ever put them back in a cage again.